And so this session is now being recorded, and that leaves me with nothing else really other than to hand over to David. David James is the Chief Learning Officer, isn't it, David, at
Yes.
360 Learning? Somebody I've known for a long time, who I have a lot of time and respect for, and somebody I sort of like to consider a professional friend. I think David is doing some really interesting stuff. So, David, over to you.
Thanks, Andy. And thank you everybody for joining us today. So as Andy mentioned, I'm Chief Learning Officer at 360 Learning, a collaborative learning platform. I'm also host of the Learning and Development podcast, and I'm very proud to say that it's the number one most popular L&D podcast in the world, in the top 1% of all podcasts listened to globally. And I suppose interestingly as well, I was Director of Learning Talent and OD for the Walt Disney Company. So I spent 15 years of my L&D career in-house in setting up and running, leading learning and development functions. So I like to think that that what I share, whether it's in sessions like this on the podcast or articles that I write, they're grounded as much as possible in the practical reality, because what was it that Mike Tyson said? Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face. And I think that learning and development similarly. Gratefully, I don't think there's any physical violence, but everyone's got a grand plan until it lands in our organisations, and we're hit by our stakeholders' reactions and perhaps their hesitancy and reluctancy. So I like to think that that what I bring to this is some of that practical reality of how this stuff lands. And skills-based learning, I think, is gaining quite a lot of traction. I think that it's a really useful. I'm concentrating on skills-based learning rather than skills-based organizations, because I don't believe that you need to have even the aspiration to move towards a skills-based organization to capitalize on the incredible opportunity that skills-based learning provides for us. And so what I want to do today is explore with you some of the insights that we've gained from a survey that we've conducted and a report that we've published via 360 Learning on quite a sizable sample size as well. So over 3,000 respondents across the UK, the US, and Europe. So we've provided a link here that you can gain more detail on this. But I'd like to start off by exploring with you the state of upskilling and reskilling via the report on the survey responses that we've gained. Talk about why skills-based learning, I believe, is the missing link. Again, building on the responses that we gained, and what it is that you could do to get started as well. Trying to ground it in practical reality. So let's start by the state of upskilling and reskilling. And at this stage, I'd love to get your thoughts, your insights. We've got a poll to kick us off, because I would like to know what this emphasis on skills, how this sits with you. Is it number one? Right, here's my cynical side already. Here we go again. Is this not just a rehash of competencies, behaviors, and capabilities? I've been around for all of those in my near 25 years in learning and development. And are we talking about skills in the same way that we've talked about these previously? Number two, would you say that you're all in and see this as the path to more effective L&D? Would you say number three, I'm yet to be convinced, but I'm open to it? Or number four, something else? And if it is number four, then please do let us know in the comments.
We have we have a couple of votes for number four at the moment, and three I can see at the moment, and I can see Leo is typing. It's an interesting spread. You can't necessarily see the results. I can see as the results come in, they're coming in real time to me, and I can see as the votes are going up and down. It was very interesting. Immediately, one of the scores went higher than the others, and that was number two. Strangely, but we'll give people a few more moments to vote. And interesting, Leo has commented there, David, as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, curious how this could provide and unlock greater diversity for bringing a broader group of people in. Yeah, thanks, Leo.
There is definitely something relating to skills. Yeah, and Claire in the comments has said here to learn how this can be done, and also Laura said due to buy-in from the C-suite and the body of work for a team of 2 in our L&D team. So yeah, there's definitely a capacity issue that relates to this. I'll put the results out now so people can see the results, and there you go.
Wonderful. Thanks, Andy. And thanks everyone for getting involved so early. Because I must admit, I think I've been all three during my time. When I first heard of skills, my first thoughts were, oh, here we go again. So hence you can see that's actually written in my language here. But the more that I've understood and as not to signpost too much ahead, I think that the advances in technology and the way that it's being applied right now gives me a lot more hope. But thank you again. What I like about the emphasis on skills as opposed to competencies, behaviors, and capabilities of before is that I believe right now we are aligned to our organization, what our leaders are actually telling us. And this can be recognized in a lot of the headlines as well. I think it's fair to say that capabilities, behaviors, and competencies weren't front page news in the national newspapers or international newspapers. Maybe I'm being a little bit cruel and suggesting they weren't in newspapers at all, because I think that a lot of the time they were HR initiatives in order to find ways of communicating more consistently how the workforce should act and operate, and from there we would see results. But I think skills is a different matter. When we're talking about skills market, we're talking about skills gaps. This is language that our leaders understand, and I think that similarly to what happened in the aftermath of COVID, what with remote working and the requirement for many of our managers to manage remotely, what that meant for working day to day as opposed to business as usual, and then well-being. That was an opportunity for learning and development to plug into and help our organizations with the primary the biggest priorities that were present to us at that time. And I see skills in a similar way, that it's not always that we're aligned, but with this, I think that there is. And so if we are seeking to address skills gaps, we are looking to address some gaps in the labor market where perhaps skills aren't as readily available, then what we are doing is we're appealing to what already is within the rhetoric of our leadership, and then we're able to draw a direct line between our effort, our investment, and the results that we're seeking to gain. And so through our research, we've recognized that there are 4 main reasons for the skills shortage, and we'll dip into the results already. We see that there was a large proportion in each camp here, whether it be over 40% of respondents. And again, I'll point you to the sample size, which I believe was really quite significant. We're talking about over 3,000 respondents from around the world. Over 40% stated that they are experiencing the departure of employees aged over 57, so they're leaving the organization. As we know, they're leaving the labor market as well, leaving shortfalls. We recognized as well that over 60% of respondents said that they're seeing higher turnover of younger employees as well, which was, I think, signposted to us in Reid Hoffman's book, The Alliance, which I think was published in 2012, when it said that younger generations were looking more of a tour of duty. There's always in response to, and not to position this as a new phenomenon at all, but you know, we're talking 20, 25 years ago when a job for life was becoming rarer, if not non-existent. The response to that by younger generations, and you've got to admire them for adapting. They recognise that they're in it for what they can gain. So whether it is experience or whether it be an opportunity to grow and develop some core skills before they move on. but certainly higher turnover of younger employees was cited as the biggest contributor to skills shortage. The least popular, but again, we're talking just shy of 40%, a shorter shelf life of skills. We're seeing the half-life of skills reducing and reducing. And perhaps this is because, and leading to number 5 here, because emerging skills are, or skills are actually evolving, and new skills are emerging in the workforce that aren't as prevalent in the market yet. So it is actually harder to recruit people with the skills that are required in order for organizations to be successful today and certainly thrive in what is a very much disruptive and more difficult business climate. And so when we asked why upskilling and reskilling efforts are failing, and I think it's fair to say that not all upskilling and reskilling efforts are successful, because we are still, despite the heavy investment in learning and skills platforms and learning and development, certainly this being a priority for learning and development for a number of years, I can cite, and I'm sure that I'll be thanked for it, that the LSG's own Donald Taylor, with his global sentiment survey, which I believe comes out at the beginning of each year, so we can expect another one. Skilling, whether skills development or upskilling, reskilling, or generally skills, has been up and around the highest priority for learning and development for quite some time now. I might be a little early to go with my predictions for 2024. But I believe that skills will be right up there with, let me guess, AI, in perhaps the top 1 or 2, maybe top 3 priorities for learning and development in next year's global sentiment survey. And part of the reason there is that we've not quite got it right. And I'm not here to hammer L&D. As I've said, I've run learning and development departments, so I know how hard this stuff is. But some of the key blockers to us achieving this were, number 1, no clear career paths, and I'll come back to that. I've got a couple of slides in which I'd like to unpack that a little further. But over 40% of respondents said that a lack of skills assessments is going to hold them back, and of course it is. If you don't understand your current level of skill across your organization, and not just necessarily organization-wide, but by geography, by job function, and by team and individuals, then you've got next to no chance of actually measuring whether your upskilling efforts have actually helped or not. Slow upskilling and reskilling is another indication that there's been heavy investment, but we're not seeing the return yet on our upskilling and reskilling efforts. But it is heartening to see that not everything's broken, and I think it's really important that we see that around about 1/5 of respondents said that they're not experiencing a bottleneck of as far as their upskilling and reskilling efforts are concerned. So what we could do is we can find out what they're doing and learn from those folks as well. But we did see what I think is a considerable and significant mismatch, because overwhelmingly, L&D professionals told us that they did have a comprehensive understanding of the skills that were present in their organization, which included the skills gaps. But on the other hand, and this is what I was alluding to previously, learners themselves, when asked, said that they didn't have the career visibility, or they strongly disagreed that they didn't have career development paths in place for them. And I think this is absolutely critical, because for a long time we've sought the ideal state that we would be able to nurture self-directed learners, and then there has been, I don't wish to overgeneralize or oversimplify, that if we had self-directed learners, then we would have more capable employees and a deeper talent pool as a result. But what I think this is saying, and I think this is again the missing link, is we need to provide focus. If we are going to create a deeper, richer talent pool within our organizations, then we need to be able to understand where we have the gaps, where we have the opportunity, and direct our employees to where they're more likely to be able to have increased prospects or enhanced prospects in our organizations. But this was a kicker for me. I'd love to know what you think. So please do tell me in the comments. A third of employees said that they had clear career visibility, and of course that resonates with me. That in any organisation I've worked in, whether we see people on programs or not, or I'm involved in conversations with them or their teams, they're just full steam ahead. They're well regarded in the organisation, and it's almost as if the organisation is looking after them. But it's probably because, for one reason or another, they're very clear about what they want to achieve. I love the honesty of the 9% as well. They have no interest in developing their career path right now. And I think that you'll probably recognize that there's a proportion of people in your organization too, but it's the 57% here that I think are worthy of our attention. He said that they have only somewhat or no visibility of what their next potential move is. And so if they don't understand what it is, then we've got to ask, how are they expected to focus their development on what areas, in what content, on what programs, what relationships, and in what ways they focus their potential growth, their interests within the organization. I thought that this was absolutely critical. But it's one thing to show a path, it's one thing to understand the gaps, but what is it that we're doing to help people with the actual transition? Because you can prepare all you like to get yourself to look favorably amongst the hiring managers, but the actual skill development is going to be in being able to perform within the next role. And so we asked to what extent employees felt that they had effective internal knowledge to support their internal transition. You can see that for a third of respondents, it was seamless. And again, we've got to pat ourselves on the back as organizations and working in people functions and HR, that if they believe that it's seamless, then there's a lot that's being done right. 58%, or just over 58%, said that it was well-meaning, but there were a lot of gaps. Nearly 7% said it felt largely as if they were left to sink or swim, and 2% said it was so bad. So again, rather than using this as a stick to beat L&D with, I think this is an important way of looking and seeing the potential and the opportunity that we have at learning and development to do so. And I think that this is the absolute crux of it here. I interviewed had Miriam Nealon, formerly at Google, now I think at Novartis, on my podcast, and we were talking about skills, upskilling and reskilling, and her response was, well, if we've not been doing upskilling and reskilling for all these years, what have we been doing? And of course, she and I laughed about this, and I've mentioned it quite a lot since, because you can see her point. But if I were to ask you who should be leading the skills-based learning transition, you might be surprised that learning and development are only doing so for around 30% of our respondents, and that over 3/4 said that it was the C-suite or the talent team. So that would be more senior HR teams there, and what was that, about 35-40% said it was line managers. So again, there is a massive opportunity here, that if we perhaps aren't meeting the expectations of our stakeholders, and maybe it's not an expectation of the stakeholders because we've not provided them with the insight into this is what we do, then that mantle has been taken by others, which I think is an interesting place. But again, I'd love your thoughts on that. Again, it's not a stick to beat L&D with. This is just a reflection of the insights that we gained, but the opportunity that stands right in front of us. So I'll come to another poll very, very shortly. Again, I'd be very interested in your thinking, what you're thinking here, and reflecting on what I'm sharing. But I believe that skills-based learning is this missing link. I think that this skills-based organizations and skills-based learning has been something that Deloitte and McKinsey have been talking about for quite some time. I've got a guest lined up on the L&D podcast whose organization has pivoted to skills-based organization, and I can't wait to fully explore that. And that is a major international global brand. without going too far into that, because I don't know how much he's going to share and how much that's going to be confidential. So I'll hold back on naming them. But the more you scratch below the surface, the more you're seeing organizations seeing the benefit of pivoting, if not to skills-based organization, then certainly skills-based learning. And before the poll that I share next, I just wanted to share a definition. I couldn't find a definition actually for skills-based learning that wasn't ingrained in education. And of course, my 25 years in learning and development have taught me anything, is that organizational learning and educational learning are chalk and cheese, very, very different ends. The fact that it might look like one might look like the other is one of the biggest misnomers in life, and certainly of all of my professional career. But skills-based learning, as far as organizations is concerned, as I've mentioned before, I think it is learning and development or corporate learning aligning with what are being recognized as some of the biggest priorities facing organizations today. Our leaders can see it, our HR teams can see it, our C-suite can see it, and this is currently affecting not just organizations, not just industries, but entire economies. GDP is being affected because there are gaps, there are skills gaps in our workforce, and there is an opportunity to step up. So the rest of that definition is about that alignment and taking control of the supply issues in the market, for which there are some incredible examples. I've referenced many a time the work that Sarah Allen and Molly Howes are leading at Aviva at the moment, recognizing that generative AI is going to have a significant impact on customer service in Aviva. And they're taking it upon themselves to upskill their current customer service teams into digital. They've set themselves a target of 200 people pivoting from customer service to digital roles, and their measure of success is that 200 people pivot from the customer service to digital roles. So a hard measure. And so this is what skills-based learning is all about. It's about the hard measure to plug the actual skills gaps, not just as you might think, for the benefit of the organization today, but it might actually be affecting your wider talent pool to shore up your organization for tomorrow. So I'd love to ask you a question again. So please, I'm sure that Andy's got the poll already here. Where are you in your skills-based learning journey? I'd imagine that because you're here, it's at least a consideration. And so please do let me know whether you're currently running skills-based learning program, whether you've just started and you're in the earlier stages, whether you're considering it, or this will be the curveball. You're here, but you're not planning to implement skills-based learning at all. Maybe you've been listening to me witter on here and you've seen the stats and thought, I don't think I'll bother. Oh, look, there's too many already. Look at that.
Loads of people responding. And Paolo says no planning, only anxiety about the future and anxiety. That's I really hope that doesn't follow through that way. Amazing conversation, by the way, everybody. Loving the conversation in the chat, loving the questions. You need to leave plenty of time at the end, David, because there are so many questions coming in, and they're smart and intelligent and really pointed questions, which is great. And I'm looking at the results here, which is really interesting. I'll give a moment or two just to see what else comes in. Katie's told us head of L&D needs convincing. It's just interesting how we help people. I have a lot of conversations with organizations, and it's most of my time is just trying to convince people that do you know what, this works, and we know it works, and here's the evidence about it, just to prove it. A moment. Any more results? Okay, let's put the results out here. This might surprise you, David.
So we've got all right. So yeah, very, very interesting. Very interesting.
That suggests to me that people are ready to go. and they just
mm,
want to know the mechanics around how to make some of this happen. Well, I say people are ready to go. 44% of people, a large minority of people, are ready to go, and
mm.
they're just looking at maybe the mechanics that go around it, which is interesting because we've got lots of people telling us that everything's ready to go and we can do these things now.
Oh, which is brilliant. So what I'll do is, first of all, thanks everyone again, and thanks Andy for that. What I'll do is I will get through this because I really do want to take the questions, but hopefully some of the questions will be answered on here as well. So let me talk about how I believe skills-based learning is the missing link between skills and L&D. Now, apologies because I think that we've got quite a sophisticated a demographic in learning and development right now. I think that yes, there was a way that we used to do things with occasional learning needs analysis, and there are more efficient, effective, and more agile ways of doing this, say with a backlog, and there's probably more in the middle as well. So I don't wish to sound as if I'm all one or the other. I recognize that there is a scale, but if we think about a more traditional approach to learning and development, the occasional learning needs analysis, which was a way of leaders and managers feeding in what they believed were some of the gaps that they were seeing from their people, which provided learning and development with information about where they might plug content and skills gaps, which didn't always match with what people actually needed in order to do their jobs more effectively. And of course, when you have a model like this, where it's a resource allocation exercise, because learning solutions used to be so much more expensive. It used to take so much more time to develop. And of course, once you've developed it, there was the scheduling and attendance, and let alone the time for people to apply. So it used to be heavier and more time consuming. Whereas, and then what we'd need to do is that our response was to have comprehensive content libraries and curricula. But the problem with all of that was that we very rarely, if ever, could demonstrate our impact. A lot of the time, we created or provided solutions looking for problems. But what I see is how skills can be the missing link is that if we're doing this right, then it's the skills that are driving the solutions. So if we can recognize, if we can map where we are as an organization, not just where as an organization, but as far as teams and departments are concerned, and even roles, then what we can do is ensure that if we understand what that gap is between the current level of capability and the desired level, then we can be really laser focused on closing those skills gaps. And then, as I mentioned before, with the great work that's happening at Aviva, we can hang our hat on actually preparing people for moves. And I think that one of the biggest opportunities is that we demonstrate our value this way. We get greater currency and credibility in our organizations, and then we integrate and we align more with our talent acquisition teams, perhaps even workforce planning and compensation and benefits. And then we can take our part of the credit for internal mobility as well. So how do we get started on this? This is the absolute kicker here. So I'm sure that there's going to be plenty of questions on in the chat around this. And you're going to have to let me know. Did we kind of do this one? This poll?
Goodness, we seem to have done that poll. That's peculiar.
Oh, but that's okay. Like
what happened with the slides then? That's really, really weird. Okay, yeah. Apologies.
No, that's all right. That's all right. So on this journey here, and of course, the reason I asked this question was that sometimes what's stopping us from even starting is our perception of some of our key stakeholders. But what I think is absolutely crucial here, and let me take a step back. Since I've been in learning and development, and perhaps for the last 15 or 20 years, a lot of people haven't progressed with perhaps a more appropriate or modern style of learning and development is this belief that they need to change the culture first. You need to change the learning culture in order to do some of the stuff that is less expected. But with this skills-based journey, this isn't generally the case because it is the language of our organizations. But what we need to do is we need to do this in a way that that doesn't seem risky, that doesn't seem too radical, and that we're not taking anything away from our stakeholders who value the products and experiences that they get from learning and development. For example, when the stakeholder asks for training, the answer isn't, oh, we don't do training anymore, we do skills-based learning journeys. You know, you're taking something away. There is a more savvy way that you say yes, but then you hang your hat on the actual development of skills rather than necessarily just the delivery of what's being asked for. So the key to this is tapping into and understanding where the urgency is in your organization around skills, and not thinking that it's just plug a platform in, make sure there's enough content for absolutely everybody, press customize it, press publish, and then everybody's going to be engaged, because it's just not the case. But the different stages, I'd like to, I'm sure that that with these next two slides, I'm going to be answering a lot of the questions going to be asked, because until now, there were key barriers to stopping us actually getting started with any kind of skills-based learning approach. And number one, of course, skills isn't new. As I mentioned before, the Global Sentiment Survey, skills have been up and around it for, I'd say, somewhere between 5 and 10 years. But one of the big problems to this before was manual skills mapping. We did a similar exercise at Disney on job families, and I think it took about 2 years in order to get to a stage where every level was mapped, regardless of where people were across the EMEA organization. But as soon as publish was pressed, and I'm slightly embarrassed to say this, that manuals were actually printed out in binders and handed out, you know, pretty much as soon as that's done, it's going to be out of date to some degree. And so not just the manual mapping process, but the keeping it up to date was a lot of the time a barrier to people even getting started. But if you don't map the skills of all of those skills, then you can't show people what it means to master your current role, and then signpost where you might be able to go in the organization next. It was almost a pipe dream because of just how manual that needed to be. And again, I'm sure that's been your experience previously. And also a top-down approach to development. Again, I'll refer to competencies, behaviors, and capabilities, which were generally frameworks developed that were supposed to speak to entire organizations, regardless of geography. So you'd look at yours, and this was my experience at Disney, 2007, receive the competency framework. I take a look down and say, are we sure this maps to China? We could clearly see that this was driven from US head office. This was based on trying to appeal to absolutely every job function. And at Disney at the time, it was like 14 different business units, as diverse as Disney Cruise Line and ad sales, so advertising, ad sales, lawyers. This was the Disney Store, as well as ABC News and ESPN, so reporting and sports channels. And we have one competency framework for everyone. And so you can see that it can't possibly work. So trying to appeal to everybody, it appealed to nobody. And so trying to do a skills-based learning approach top down would have had experienced the same issues as that. Is it about control? Is it about enablement? Is it really about performance and development? You know, those could be challenged, I suppose. Spoiler alert, we're talking about skills now, but who's really talking about competencies, behaviors, and capabilities? It didn't work. So I think that but those top-down approaches to almost command control, and then get the benefits from development were always going to be nigh on impossible. And then L&D being disconnected from the company skills strategy, going back to that nigh on 25% of L&D professionals who were actually involved in not just the strategy, but held to account for the actual development as well. That disconnect meant that it was that that it was almost impossible. But this has changed, and I think that this is why it's exciting. I'm not jumping on the skills bandwagon now. I'm jumping on the, my God, we can finally do this now bandwagon, because generative AI, and this is where this moves so quickly. To think that what is it now? It's the 16th of November. 12 months ago today, ChatGPT hadn't even been released, and it's in this amount of time. And it almost seems monthly that there are new innovations that it doesn't take an enormous amount of imagination to see how that can significantly enhance what we are in organizations to do. And let's be really clear, we are there in our organizations to ensure that people are ready to perform, that we can help them get a long way, not just to mastering their role, but being able to operate and influence significantly enough in our organizations to lay out as much as possible what it means to be successful, and then help people to progress into future roles, not as a benevolent function, but in order to help our organization to capitalize on and get a return on every hire, to take advantage of the opportunities that your organization in your particular field has available, and then to future-proof it. Again, I have these conversations all the time on the podcast. We stay laser focused on that, then we can see that advances in technology can supercharge this opportunity. So if we just take a look at mapping, for example, generative AI now, and we're not talking necessarily about OpenAI or what's available to the public, but certainly ring-fenced, fully secure, firewalled versions of generative AI in your organization's technology stack can help to map your current skills in across your roles via job descriptions, but also do that externally as well, to benchmark your internal roles externally. So you just imagine that for a moment, that's being looked after by scanning the market, so that we can develop career paths that first of all lead to not just mastery of a role within in your organization, but help individuals who are motivated to, and we'll move on to the next part with the learning solutions, but can make themselves more marketable. I mean, we talk about learner engagement enormously, about people not wanting to engage in our efforts, or not being motivated to learn, and needing to create more engaging content. But if you can link people's motivation to what they'll get out of this, which we've not been able to do in learning and development for a long time, then I see that this is a huge step forward for us. It's about helping people to be better and faster at the job today. They get recognized as such, and their prospects can improve. And it's no exaggeration to say that AI can now handle about 90% of the heavy lifting in that, because so much of it is administration that can help not just us to have access and visibility of the skills map, but also for individuals to see career paths that can help them to master their current role. First of all, I suppose, get to the required level of performance, get to mastery, and then survey the opportunities sideways and upwards of what it and recognize what the transferable skills could be in order for them to develop and put themselves in the shop window of hiring managers. Number two here, I think, and again is a huge opportunity, is using generative AI in order to turn proprietary documentation and perhaps some tacit know-how into guidance and support to help people with those transitions. What is it we said before? That nearly 60% of respondents said that the transition material, or the internal guidance and support, was well intended, but there were gaps, and that there were still others who said that they were left to sink or swim. And for me, again, I'm leaning on 15 years of in-company L&D experience, is because we've missed the mark on what it is that people actually need help with. We've got our vast content suites and our libraries filled full of generic content, but what about culture? I believe about 90% of the need inside organizations emanates from the question, how do I do the right things here in my organization? And I think that our lack of engagement in our content or in our learning technologies prior to this is because anybody who's opens up a generic off-the-shelf piece of content is going to see, I don't have the time to go through this, and what I'm unlikely to get exactly what I need, because this doesn't speak to this organization that I'm actually working in. I'll give you an example. At Disney, I was we did have a vast suite of content, but none of it spoke to being in a wide-ranging media or entertainment company, a matrix organization, a predominantly marketing and promotion, sales, marketing and promotions organization within EMEA that was decisions by consensus, highly political. So you needed to operate with savvy, not overly political, not naive. There was nothing like so. So if those were the core tenets of what it meant to be successful at Disney, we had nothing that spoke to it. And so what you're able to do with generative AI now, and I love to quote Donald Clark with this, this is as bad as it's ever going to be. And the advancements in it, whether that be with turning proprietary information on PDFs into guidance and resources with constraints and parameters around that, which can get you 70% of the way there to useful documentation. Again, you're using subject matter experts then to validate and add nuance rather than create courses or content from scratch. You know, this is a huge advance. But now you've got personal AI bots that are turning, and again, I refer to Donald Clark. He's trained his generative AI chatbot on over 200 articles that he's written, and his books as well. And so you can interact with this in order to get the know-how, which changes the relationship between the consumer and knowledge. Look, this stuff's moving so fast, but this is just an example of how the generative AI can help to close the gap here. So we've moved from mapping to proprietary information on hand for guidance and support, and then you tell me that this doesn't put us right in pole position then to lead the skill strategy, because this stuff can be in our learning stack now, and then we hang our hat on actual guidance and support that increases and enhances our internal talent pools, so that learning and development will be relied on then for predictable, meaningful impact rather than attendance, completion and satisfaction, which many of us are burdened with now. So my last slide before I hand it over to questions is, so how do we do this? AI-powered upskilling and reskilling, which is the missing link that supercharges our skills-based learning efforts. Number one, leverage AI to understand the skills that you need. Maps internally and externally to provide a benchmark and help people with career paths based on their current position and many other aspirations that they can have. Of course, there will need to be assessment, but what I like to think of here is that this isn't just individual skills assessment like we do on say LinkedIn, where you might recognize that you have these skills, and then strangers will ingratiate you with telling you that yes, you can do that with endorsements. I realize the world's changed, and so it's not the what's the word I'm looking for? Everybody was endorsing everybody just a little while ago, and which meant that it was pretty much meaningless. But if this was learner driven, manager validated, alongside peers as well as stakeholders, we can build a rounded understanding of where somebody is now and where they need to focus their attention. And then if we leverage AI to develop resources with our organization's proprietary know-how. So that's again based on the documentation that we might have now, and that we might build out. See this as the gap between knowledge management, which was brilliant at getting people to take stuff out their heads, but that left a lot to be desired. And and providing guidance and support for people to be actually better at their jobs. Mention about paths that could be kept updated using generative AI. And then, of course, which I think is the last part here, which is absolutely fundamental to our credibility in learning and development, is that we've got to demonstrably improve performance and contribute towards richer, deeper internal talent pools in the way that I've said already that Sarah and Molly are doing at Aviva with their teams, but many more are as well. And so that's the end of my part here. I hope that's been useful, both for the insights from the report, but also on those steps towards it. And Andy, I'm sure there must be some questions.
There are loads of questions, and I want to apologise to everybody because my cat has decided to join us, and she has the loudest purr in the world. And through my microphone, it sounds even better. So if we see a black tail walking through, cute, possibly Thaser, possibly cute, until she sits on the keyboard, and then you start getting strange messages. Awesome conversation. Thank you, David. That was absolutely superb. And my apologies for the poll, by the way. Yeah, the purr is a feature. Thank you, Leo. The poll, what happened was we set templates up for different slides, and we put the template in for the poll, or I put the template in for the poll. I had to change it yesterday, and what it is, it's copied the same poll over twice. I've no idea why. I'm going to have to look into why it did that. So my apologies to you, David. We should have had a third poll. Sorry, everybody. But we've got amazing questions in here. I'm going to have to bunch some of them together because they're of a type. So we started off, there was, I think Leo, Andrew and Claire all talking about the same thing to this. So Andrew says, do you feel this has to be an HR end-to-end approach? Leo talks about skills as a true currency, and Claire says about senior managers being involved. So it's just like a combination of, is it skill? How do we make a currency of skills, and how do we get other people involved? What are your thoughts on that, David?
So, my thoughts on that, Andy, are I don't think we wait. I think that again, quoting Miriam Nealon, if we've not been involved in upskilling and reskilling all these decades, what on earth have we been doing? So I think that we just take it, but we hold ourselves accountable for actual upskilling and reskilling. Then in terms of individual stakeholders, because we can't do this in a vacuum, we talk about outcomes. We talk with our stakeholders about what it is that the current position and the future desired state. Then we take a skills-based approach in order to plug that. We could do this more manually, although it is laborious and it's been a blocker for people not to do this. But if you can understand from people's job descriptions or from their managers what it is that they are doing, but what they need to do, so more manually understand those skills gaps, then you can communicate that to them and have a conversation with them about experimenting to develop themselves or try these new things in order to get to the desired level. That's hard to scale. That's very, very hard to scale. So there's the smart tech now, whether it be via OpenAI and ChatGPT, as long as you're not pouring proprietary information in. Just around the corner, I mean, every single vendor worth their salt is currently developing a safe and secure generative AI into their tools. So you want to have a word with your vendors to find out what it is that they're doing. But I would say that we need to be bold. If we believe in this, then we talk about skills with our stakeholders, but we also listen to our leaders to find out where and how they are currently talking about it, and then draw the lines explicitly. So in short, don't wait. No one's going to ask you for this. If you're not demonstrating this already, then your leaders are going to be talking to your talent teams, senior HR, or the line managers to plug this themselves. This is within our realm, so I'd say that we need to draw those lines and communicate our value in different ways.
Thank you, and I think you're spot on. You look and see, well, who's developing AI tools now. We say no, it's going to be tied into our learning products. You're going to be too late, because Samsung are developing a generative AI product, Apple are developing a generative AI product, Twitter, X, developing a generative AI product. Everybody has a generative AI product. And so your stakeholders will see this in the consumer marketplace, and they will then come to you, well, why aren't we doing that with our learning content? It will force its way through. I think you're absolutely spot on there. Again, let me find some questions. Oh, there was one here. Leo said about keeping it out at speed. Oh, there was one here and I can't find it. I've lost it now. Where's it gone? Oh, that's it. Yeah, learning needs analysis. How does learning needs analysis change as a result of this? Because is it about LNA anymore, or is it something more than that?
No, I think the learning needs analysis had its day a long time ago. I think that that it is it's a relic of the old way, where, as I said, when we believe that when we still believe that top-down learning initiatives were valid, that could deliver us results. This is much more bottom up. This is much more around understanding what it is that people are expected to actually do. I do also think that and which doesn't necessarily mean that everything we do is for an individual. It's not about turning the learning needs analysis upside down, but it's about understanding the challenges that our people face in service of the things that are in our organizations to do. And we can still think about these in cohorts in the same way as before we might think about first line managers or middle management, about salespeople and customer service. But it's problem first rather than cohort first. I can't tell you how many conversations I had with, might be, we need to do something for middle managers. Why is that? Well, they're being left out. And so what you're doing is just scrapping around to fill programs and platforms full of stuff that might appeal to them. But through this approach, and we're talking about skills gaps here. So it's a brilliant way that if you've got generative AI to help you, then you could do this at scale and then still look to make the biggest difference to the biggest number of people, or the biggest difference where the priority calls. But you're doing this from an aggregated stance based on insights across your organization. But if we're talking about not just a skills-based approach, but perhaps a modern approach to learning needs analysis, then I would strongly recommend a backlog, an agile backlog over learning needs analysis, which is all about framing actual problems in your organization that need to be addressed. The cost that is currently being incurred, which is not just money, but it could be losing good people, losing opportunity, it could be creating risk, and then aligning our efforts and our resources to actually addressing that. And I think that just takes more of a performance oriented approach rather than a learning oriented approach in order to address those. But again, it's about making a demonstrable difference that you're able to do. If you can quantify the problem, then you stand a greater chance of looking back and seeing whether you've made a difference, as well as milestones to get there.
It's a mindset change as well, I think, David. It's that change from being supply side to being demand led.
Yes.
And there's a lot of where we put the courses on, let's supply them and people will approach, when actually it's about being demand led. Well, what is the specific demand? I'm going to come back to the last question. We're going to run out of time, unfortunately, otherwise. But a question from Tony, which I think was interesting, which is I'm really curious about whether there is actual skills gaps widening as is being reported, going back to early on, or is it about a different change and a change in expectation which don't match the expectation from the job and job seekers and the work that's required now? Are we actually, is it a gap in skills, or is it about a change of expectation?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. You've only got to look at the UK market right now. We've got a skills gap in hospitality. The change in expectation is that with Brexit, we've reduced the talent pool, and we've also got hospitality isn't seen as a desirable career path for many people. So you've got expectation there, as well as political factors that have impacted skills gaps, and then you've got emerging roles as well as demographic demographic shifts, as we've said, with older people leaving the workforce and younger people deciding that they're unlikely to stick about in an organization. So I think it's the most important thing is that if you work in an organization, that you understand what's going on in your organization, and don't think that it's organization wide either. What's happening in China probably isn't going to be for the same reason in the US. And also what's happening in your customer service team probably isn't going to be exactly reflected in your IT teams either. So if we are recognizing that there is a problem, then we've got to get to a position of knowing. We could do that with data. Again, generative AI will make organizational, business and people data more accessible to those of us who need to know. But once we've got that data, we need the evidence of the people who are responsible for the work, whether that be the leaders, managers, or the people themselves, and really get to a position of knowing. Because applying our efforts in order to move the needle, once we understand the problem, it's going to be faster, easier, less risky, cheaper, and better use of our time and our skills, and we're much more likely to achieve a desired outcome. So I'd say that it's like, in response to that, it's going to be all those things, but never assume.
Absolutely. What a great place to finish on. Thank you, David. I've put some links up. So there's a link to an ebook, Tech Stack for Strategic L&D, which 360 Learning produced. There's also the 360 Learning upskilling and reskilling report, and preparing your workforce with skills-based learning. I've also got the links for David and for myself in the chat there as well. And I meant to put the link in for your podcast. I've lost it now. It was here, and I've
You mean the Learning and Development podcast?
The Learning Development podcast.
On all podcast channels, isn't it?
the podcast which is number one in the world on learning development podcasts. He says, with no hint of jealousy at all in any way, shape, or form, producing a podcast myself, of course, as well. But there we go. Let's see if I can paste that link in there. There we go. Yeah, there's the link for David's Learning Development podcast. That's the link to Apple. Just to say thank you, David. That was absolutely superb. Really, really good comments from everybody in the chat. Again, these sessions only work because people are engaging with them. So I really do appreciate it. The recording, like we said, will be available tomorrow. I'm going to now go away and gargle with some salt water and have another cup of tea and see if I can get my voice back for the session later on. Just the engagement from everybody in the comments that we're seeing in the chat, David, everybody appreciated that. So thank you, everybody. Really do appreciate you being here. And apologies again for my cat. She's now decided to come sit on my keyboard again. Bless her. Thank you, everybody. Take care, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.